relentless progress against the defenders at the river's edge. At one point, several ranks of Shanshan cavalry moved out from the defensive lines and attacked the Trolloc onslaught head-on. It happened so quickly that many of the Trollocs were unable to raise their spears before contact was made. Large swaths of the foe in the front ranks went down. The Shanshan swept to the side and returned to their lines at the river. Egwene held to her channeling, forcing herself to work through sheer exhaustion. But the Trollocs didn't break. They grew enraged, attacking the humans with a frenzy. Egwene could hear their yells distinctly over the sounds of wind and water. The Trollocs grew angry, did they? Well, they would not know anger until they had felt that at the Amerlin's seat. Egwene pulled in more and more of the power until she was at the very edges of her ability. She put heat into her tempest, so that the scalding water burned Trolloc eyes, hands, hearts. She felt herself yelling, Vora's sa'angreal thrust before her like a spear. What seemed like hours went by. Eventually, exhausted, she allowed Gawain to talk her into pulling back for a time. Gawain went to fetch her horse, and as he was returning, Egwene looked across the river. There was no doubt about it. Her army's left flank had already been pushed another 30 paces. Even with the Aes Sedai aid, they were losing this battle. It was long past time for her to find Gareth Bryn. When Egwene and Gawain got back to camp, she climbed from her horse and gave it to Lylewyn, telling her to use it to help carry the wounded. There were plenty of those who had been dragged across the ford to safety, bloodied soldiers slumping against the arms of friends. Unfortunately, she hadn't the strength for healing, let alone a gateway to send wounded to Tar Valon or Mayenne. Most of the Aes Sedai not busy at the riverbank didn't look as if they were doing any better. Egwene, Gawain said softly. Rider, Shanshan, looks like a noblewoman. One of the blood? Egwene thought, standing and looking through camp toward where Gawain pointed. At least he had the strength left to keep a lookout. Why any woman would voluntarily go without a warder was beyond her. The woman approaching wore fine Shanshan silks, and Egwene's stomach turned at the sight. That finery existed because of a foundation of enslaved channelers, forced into obedience to the crystal throne. The woman was certainly one of the blood, as a contingent of Death Watch guards accompanied her. You had to be very important for... What? Gawain exclaimed. Is that Min? Egwene gaped. It was. Min rode up, scowling. Mother, she said to Egwene, bowing her head amid her stone-faced guards in dark armor. Min, are you well? Egwene asked. Careful. Don't give out too much information. Was Min a captive? Surely she couldn't have joined the Shanshan, could she? Oh, I'm well, Min said sourly. I've been pampered, stuffed in this outfit, and offered all sorts of somewhat delicate foods. I might add that among the Shanshan, delicate does not necessarily mean tasty.
I still got to roast some up.
You should see the things they drink, Egwene. I've seen them, Egwene said, unable to keep her tone from coldness. Oh, yes, I suppose you have. Mother, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Well, it depends on how much you trust Matt. I trust him to find trouble, Egwene said. I trust him to find drinking and gambling no matter where he goes. Do you trust him to lead an army? Min asked. Egwene hesitated. Did she? Min leaned forward, sparing a glance for the Death Watch guards, who didn't seem about to let her draw any closer to Egwene. Egwene, she said softly. Matt thinks that Bryn is leading your army to destruction. He says he thinks Bryn is a dark friend.
Me and my brother went to
Gawain started laughing.
Our moms.
Egwene jumped. She would have expected anger from him, outrage. Gareth Bryn? Gawain asked. A dark friend?
Yeah, but we
I
went to our
believe my
mom's
own
and aunts,
mother
and
to be a dark friend
my
before
brother
him.
cooked.
Tell Cawthon to stay out of his
for him.
wife's royal brandy. He's obviously had too
So
much.
we cooked for him. They ate, and
I'm inclined
smoked
to
a couple
agree
with
with
them.
Gawain, Egwene said slowly. Still, she could not ignore the irregularities in how the army was being led. She would sort through that. Mat is always looking out for people who don't need to be looked out for, she said. He's just trying to protect me. Tell him that we appreciate the warning. Mother, Min said. He seemed certain. This isn't a joke. He wants you to turn your armies over to him. My armies, Egwene said flatly. Yes, in the hands of Matrim Cawthon. Yes, I should mention the Empress has given him command of all the Shanshan forces. He's now Marshal General Cawthon. Taviran. Egwene shook her head. Mat is a good tactician, but handing him the White Tower's armies? No. That is beyond possibility. Besides, the armies are not mine to give him. The Hall of the Tower has authority for them. So how can we persuade these gentlemen surrounding you that you'll be safe accompanying me? As little as Egwene wanted to admit it, she needed the Shanshan. She wouldn't risk their alliance to save Min, particularly since it didn't seem that she was in immediate danger. Of course, if the Shanshan realized that Min had sworn their oaths back in Falma, then fled. Don't worry about me, Min said with a grimace. I suppose I'm better off with Fortuona. She knows about a certain talent of mine, thanks to Mat. And it might let me help her. And you. The statement was laden with meaning. The Death Watch guards were too stoic to respond overtly to Min's use of the Empress's name, but they did seem to stiffen, their faces hardening. Take care, Min, Egwene thought. You're surrounded by autumn thornweeds. Min didn't seem to care. Will you at least consider what Mat is saying? That Gareth Bryn is a dark friend? Egwene said. It really was laughable. Go back and tell Mat to submit his battle suggestions to us if he must. For now, I need to find my commanders to plan our next steps. Gareth Bryn, where are you?
A flight of black arrows rose almost invisibly into the air, then fell like a breaking wave. They hit Aitaralda's army at the mouth of the pass to the valley of Thakandar, some bouncing off shields, others finding flesh. One fell inches from where Aitaralda stood atop a rocky outcropping. Aitaralda didn't flinch. He stood straight-backed, hands clasped behind him. He did, however, mutter, "Letting things draw a little close, aren't we?" Binda, the Ashaman who stood beside him in the night, grimaced. "Sorry, Lord Aitaralda." He was supposed to keep the arrows away. He'd done well so far. Sometimes, however, he got a distant look at his face and started muttering about them, trying to take his hands. "Stay sharp," Aitaralda said. His head throbbed. More dreams earlier tonight, so real. He had seen Trollocs eating members of his family alive, and had been too weak to save them. He had struggled and wept as they ate Tamsin and his children, but at the same time had been lured by the sense of the boiling and burning flesh. At the end of the dream, he had joined the monsters in their feast. "Put that from your mind," he thought. It was not easy to do so. The dreams had been so vivid. He had been glad to be awakened by a Trolloc attack. He'd been ready for this. His men lit bonfires at the barricades. The Trollocs had finally pushed through his thorn fortifications,
Hey, how you doing?
but their butcher's bill had been high. Now Aitaralda's men fought at the mouth of the pass, holding the tides back from entering the valley. They had applied their time well during the days the Trollocs had pushed their way through arduous barriers to the mouth of the
Welcome.
pass. The entrance to the valley was now fortified with a series of chest-high earthen bulwarks. These would be excellent for crossbowmen to use as cover if Ituralda's pike formations were ever
Just
pushed
about
back
to
too far.
Roll a couple
For
up
now,
and
Ituralda had split his army into groups of
kick back
around
and,
3,000 men each, then organized them into square formations of pikes,
just kick back and
billhooks, and
smoke a couple.
crossbows. He used mounted crossbowmen as skirmishers in the front and on the flanks,
Yep,
and it formed up a vanguard
I'm
about
about
6
to roll a
ranks deep
couple up.
of pikemen. Big pikes, 20 feet long. He'd learned from Maradan that you wanted to keep your distance from the Trollocs. Pikes worked wonderfully. Ituralda's pike squares could pivot and fight in all directions in case they were surrounded. Trollocs could be forced to fight in ranks, but these squares, properly applied, could break up their lines. Once the Trolloc ranks were shattered,
But I'm
the Aiel could
smoking
kill with abandon.
some roach weed.
Behind ranks of pikemen, he positioned foot soldiers carrying billhooks and halberds. Sometimes Trollocs fought their way through the pikes, pushing the weapons aside or pulling them down with the weight of corpses. The billhookmen then moved up, slipping between the pikemen, and hamstrung the leading Trollocs.
Oh, did
This
it?
gave the leading foot soldiers time
Oh,
to
that
pull
sucks,
back
bro.
and regroup, while the next
I
wave of
went
soldiers,
ahead and
more foot with pikes,
rung your
moved up
bell
to
on this
engage
one
the
too.
Trollocs.
That sucks
was
about
working
your other
so
channel,
far.
bro.
He had a dozen such squares of troops facing the
Well,
Trollocs in
before I
the
roll
night.
this, I'll be
They
right
fought
back.
defensively, doing whatever they could to break the surging tide. The Trollocs threw themselves at the pikemen,
One of
trying
my
to crack
old
them, but each square
GG
operated
shirts.
independently. Ituralda didn't worry about the Trollocs that made it through the gauntlet because they would be handled by the Aiel. Ituralda had to keep his hands clasped
I'll be
behind
right
his back to conceal their shaking. Nothing had been the same after Maradan. He'd learned, but he'd paid dearly for that education. Burn these headaches, he thought, and burn those Trollocs. 3 times he had nearly given the order to send his armies in with a direct assault, abandoning the square formations. He could imagine them slaughtering, killing, no more delaying. He wanted blood. Each time he'd stopped himself. They weren't here for blood. They were here to hold, to give that man the time he needed in the cavern. That was what it was all about. Wasn't it? Why did he have such terrible trouble remembering that lately?
Okay, I'm back.
Another wave of Trolloc arrows dropped onto Ituralda's men. The Fades had some of them stationed on the tops of the slopes above
what,
the
let me go
pass
ahead
in
and,
places that Ituralda's own archers had once held.
Give you a wrench in this
Getting
one
them
too.
up there must have been quite an undertaking. The walls of the pass were very
There we
steep.
go.
How many would have dropped to their deaths making the attempt? Regardless, Trollocs weren't good shots with bows, but they didn't need to be when firing at armies. The halberdiers raised shields. They couldn't fight while holding those, but they kept them strapped to their backs for need. The falling arrows increased, plummeting through the lightly foggy night air. The storm rumbled overhead, but the windfinders were at their task again, keeping it away. They claimed that at several moments the army had been mere breaths away from an all-out storm of destruction. At one point, hail the size of a man's fist had fallen for about a minute before they'd wrested control of the weather again. If that was what awaited them if the windfinders weren't using their bowl, Ituralda was more than happy to leave them at their task. The Dark One wouldn't care how many Trollocs he destroyed while sending a blizzard, twister, or hurricane to kill the humans they fought. "They're gathering for another surge at the mouth of the pass," someone yelled in the night air, followed by other calls confirming it. Ituralda peered through the mist, aided by light from the bonfires. The Trollocs were indeed regrouping. "Withdraw the 7th and 9th Infantry squads," Ituralda said. "They've been at it too long. Pull the 4th and 5th out of reserve and have them take flanking positions. Prepare for more arrows, and..." He trailed off, frowning. What were those Trollocs doing? They'd pulled back farther than he'd have expected, drawing into the darkness of the pass. They couldn't be retreating, could they? A dark wave slid out of the mouth of the pass. Murdraw. Hundreds upon hundreds of
Yeah,
them.
Auntie, I was wondering
Black
why
cloaks
I
that
hadn't
did
been
not
seeing
move
no
in
notifications
defiance
come
of the
out.
breeze. Faces with no eyes, lips that sneered, black swords. The creatures moved like eels, sinuous and sleek. They gave no time for orders, no time for response. They flowed into the squares of defenders, sliding between pikes, whipping deadly swords. Aiel! Ituralda bellowed.
That's why I
Bring
like
in the
doing this
Aiel!
one because
All of them! And channelers! Everyone except for
What
those who
you call
guarded
it?
the pit of doom
I
itself!
don't get in trouble
Move!
for this one.
Move! Messengers scrambled away. Ituralda watched in horror. An army of Murdral. Light. It was as bad as his nightmares. The 7th Infantry collapsed before the attack, square formation shattering. Ituralda opened his mouth to order the primary reserve, the one defending his position, to give support. He needed the cavalry to ride out and draw pressure off the infantry. He didn't have much cavalry. He'd agreed that most of the horsemen would be needed on other fronts, but he did have some. They'd be essential here. Except... He squeezed his eyes shut. Light, but he was exhausted. He had trouble thinking. Pull back before the attack, a voice seemed to be saying to him. Pull back to the Aiel, then make a stand there. Pull back, he whispered. Pull. Something felt very,
sucks.
very
Got
wrong
one rolled up.
about
Just gotta
doing
get
that.
one more.
Why was his mind insisting upon it? Captain Tahara, Ituralda tried to whisper. You have command. It wouldn't come out. Something physical seemed to be holding his mouth shut. He could hear men screaming. What was happening? Dozens of men could die fighting a single Murdral. At Maradan, he'd lost an entire company of archers,
Did they
100
say
men
why
to
they,
2 Fades who had slipped into the city at night.
They took your
His
channel?
defensive squads were built to deal with Trollocs, to hamstring them, to drop them. The Fades would crack those pike squares open like eggs. Nobody was doing what needed to be done. My lord Ituralda, Captain Tahara said. My lord, what was it you said? If they retreated, the Trollocs would surround them. They needed to stand firm. Ituralda's lips opened to give the order to retreat. Pull the... Wolves. Wolves appeared in the fog like shadows. They leaped at the Murdral, growling. Ituralda started, spinning, as a man in furs pulled himself up onto the top of the rocky outcrop. Tahara stumbled back, calling for their guards. The newcomer in furs leaped for Ituralda and shoved him off the top of the rocks. Ituralda did not fight back. Whoever this man was, Ituralda was grateful to him, feeling a moment of victory as he fell. He hadn't given the order to retreat. He hit the ground not far below, and it knocked the wind out of him. The wolves took his arms in gentle mouths and pulled him off into the darkness as he slowly drifted into unconsciousness.
Egwene sat in the camp as the battle for the border of Candor continued. Her army held back the Trollocs. The Seanchan fought alongside her troops just across the river. Egwene herself held a small cup of tea. Light. It was galling. She was the Amerlin, but she was drained of energy. She still hadn't found Gareth Bryn, but that wasn't unexpected. He moved about. Sylviana was hunting him and should have word soon. Aes Sedai had been sent to take the wounded to Mayenne. The sun drooped low in the sky, like an eyelid that refused to stay open. Egwene's hand shook as she held her cup. She could still hear the battle. It seemed that the Trollocs would fight into the night, grinding the human armies against the river. Distant shouts rose like the calls of an angry crowd, but the explosions from the channelers had slowed. She turned to Gawain. He didn't seem tired at all, though he was strangely pale. Egwene sipped her tea and silently cursed him. It was unfair, but she wasn't concerned with fairness right now. She could grumble at her warder. That was what they were for, wasn't it? A breeze blew through camp. She was a few hundred paces east of the fort, but she smelled blood in the air. Nearby, a squad of archers drew their bows at their commander's call, launching a volley of arrows. A pair of black-winged drakkar plummeted moments later, hitting the ground with dull thuds just beyond camp. More would come as it grew dark, and they had an easier time hiding against the sky. Matt. She felt strangely sick thinking about him. He was such a blowhard, a carouser, leering at every pretty woman he met, treating her like a painting and not a person. He was mad. Once, when Egwene had been around 13, he'd jumped into the river to save Kiem Lewin from drowning. Of course, she hadn't been drowning. She'd merely been dunked under the water by a friend, and Matt had come running, throwing himself into the water to help. The men of Emmons Field had made sport of him for months about that. The next spring, Matt had pulled Jer Alhune from the same river, saving the boy's life. People had stopped making fun of Matt for a while afterward. That was how Matt was. He'd grumbled and muttered all winter about how people made sport of him, insisting that next time he'd just let them drown. Then the moment he'd seen someone in danger, he'd gone splashing right back in. Egwene could remember gangly Matt stumbling from the river, little Jer clinging to him and gasping, a look of pure terror in his eyes. Jer had gone down without making a sound. Egwene had never realized that could happen. People who started to drown didn't yell or sputter or call for help. They just slipped under the water when everything seemed fine and peaceful, unless Matt was watching. He came for me in the Stone of Tyr, she thought. Of course, he'd also tried to save her from the Aes Sedai, unwilling to believe she was Amyrlin. So which was this? Was she drowning or not? How much do you trust Matrim Cawthon? Min had asked. Light. I do trust him. Fool that I am, I do. Matt could be wrong. He often was wrong. But when he was right, he saved lives. Egwene forced herself to stand. She wavered, and Gawain came to her side. She patted him on the arm, then stepped away from him. She would not let the army see its Amyrlin so weak that she had to lean against someone for support. What reports do we have from the other battlefronts? Not much today, Gawain said. He frowned. In fact, it's been rather silent. Elaine was supposed to fight at Carrion, Egwene said. It was an important battle. She might be too occupied to send word. I want you to send a messenger by Gateway. I need to know how that battle is going. Gawain nodded, hurrying off. After he was gone, Egwene walked at a steady pace until she found Silviana, who was talking with a pair of blue sisters. Bryn? Egwene asked. In the mess tent, Silviana said. I only just had word. I sent a runner to tell him to stay put until you arrived. Come. She walked over to the tent, the largest shelter in camp by far, and spotted him as she entered, not eating, but standing against the cook's travel table with his maps spread out. The table smelled of onions, which had probably been cut there time and time again. Yukiri had a gateway open in the floor to look down on the battlefield. She closed it as Egwene arrived. They didn't leave it open long, not with the Sharans watching for it and preparing weaves to send through it. Egwene whispered very quietly to Silviana. Gather the whole of the tower. Bring back any sitters you can find. Get them all here to this tent as soon as you can. Silviana nodded, her face betraying no hint of the confusion she likely felt. She hastened off, and Egwene sat down in the tent. Swan wasn't there. She was likely helping with healing again. That was good. Egwene wouldn't have wanted to attempt this with Swan glaring at her. As it was, she worried about Gawain. He loved Bryn like a father, and already his anxiety streamed through their bond. She would have to approach this very delicately, and she didn't want to start until the hall had arrived. She couldn't accuse Bryn, but she couldn't ignore Matt. He was a scoundrel and a fool, but she trusted him. Light help her, but she did. She'd trust him with her life. And things had been going oddly on the battlefield. The sitters gathered relatively quickly. They had charge of the war effort, and they met together each evening to get reports and tactical explanations from Bryn and his commanders. Bryn didn't seem to think it odd that they came to him now. He kept at his work. Many of the women did give Egwene curious looks as they entered. She nodded to them, trying to convey the weight of the Amerlin seat. Eventually, enough of them had arrived that Egwene decided she should begin. Time was wasting. She needed to dismiss Matt's accusations from her mind once and for all, or she needed to act on them. "General Bryn," Egwene said. "Have you been well? We've had a difficult time finding you." He looked up and blinked. His eyes were red. "Mother," he said. He nodded to the sitters. "I feel tired, but probably no more than you. I've been all over the battlefield, tending to all kinds of details. You know how it is." Gawain hurried in. "Egwene," he said, his face pale. "Trouble." "What?" He took a deep breath. "General Bashir turned against Elaine. Light. He's a dark friend. The battle would have been lost had the Ashaman not arrived." "What's this?" Bryn asked, looking up from his maps. "Bashir? A dark friend?" "Yes. Impossible," Bryn said. "He was the Lord Dragon's companion for months. I don't know him well, but a dark friend? It couldn't be." "It is somewhat unreasonable to assume," Saerin said. "You can speak with the Queen yourself if you wish," Gawain said, standing tall. "I heard it from her own mouth." The tent stilled. Sitters looked to one another with worried faces. "General," Egwene said to Bryn, "how was it that you sent 2 cavalry units to protect us from the Trollocs on the hills south of here, sending them into a trap and leaving the main army's left flank exposed?" "How was it, Mother?" Bryn asked. "It was obvious that you were about to be overrun. Anyone could see that. Yes, I had them leave the left flank, but I moved the Ileana reserves into that position. When I saw that Sharan cavalry unit split off to attack Uno's right flank, I sent the Ileanas out to intercept them. It was the right thing to do. I didn't know there would be so many Sharans." His voice had raised to a shout, but he stopped, and his hands were trembling. "I made a mistake.
Yep, lady number 1.
I'm not perfect, Mother." "This was more than a mistake," Faisella said. "I have just returned from speaking with Uno and the other survivors of that cavalry massacre. Uno said he could smell a trap as soon as he and his men started riding toward the sisters, but that you had promised him help." "I told you. I sent him reinforcements. I just didn't expect the Sharans would send such a large force. Besides, I had it all under control. I had ordered up a Shanshan cavalry legion to reinforce our troops. They were supposed to take care of those Sharans. I had them staged across the river. I just didn't expect them to be so late." "Yes," Egwene said, hardening her voice. "Those men, so many thousands of them, were crushed between the Trollocs and the Sharans with no hope for escape. You lost them, and all for no good reason." "I had to bring the Aes Sedai out," Bryn said. "They're our most valuable resource. Pardon, Mother, but you have made that same point to me." "The Aes Sedai could have waited," Saerin said. "I was there. Yes, we needed out, we were being pressed, but we held, and could have held longer. You left thousands of good men to die, General Bryn. And you know the worst part? It was unnecessary. You left all those Shanshan across the ford here, the ones who were going to save the day, waiting for your order to attack. But that order never came, did it, General? You abandoned them, just like you abandoned our cavalry. But I ordered them to attack. They finally went in, didn't they? I sent a messenger. No. If it wasn't for Matt Cawthon, they would still be waiting on this side of the river, General. Egwene turned away from him. Egwene, Gawain said, taking her arm. What are you saying? Just because... Bryn raised a hand to his head. Then he sagged, as if suddenly his limbs had lost their strength. I don't know what's wrong with me, he whispered, sounding hollow.
Hell yeah.
I keep making mistakes, Mother. They're the kind a man can recover from, and I keep telling myself that. Then I make another mistake, and there is more scrambling to fix it. You're just tired, Gawain said, voice pained, looking to him. We all are. No, Bryn said softly. No, it's more than that.
Hell yeah.
I've been tired before. This is like... My instincts are suddenly wrong. I give the orders, then afterwards I see the holes, problems. Compulsion, Egwene said, feeling cold. You've been compelled. They're attacking our great captains. Several women in the room embraced the source. How would that be possible? Gawain protested. Egwene, we have sisters watching the camp for signs of channeling. I don't know how it happened, Egwene said. Perhaps it was put in place months ago before the battle began. She turned to the sitters. I move that the hall relieve Gareth Bryn as commander of our armies. It is your decision, sitters. Light? Yukiri said. We... light? It must be done, Doacine said. It is a clever move, a way to destroy our armies without us seeing the trap. We should have seen. The great captains should have been better protected. Light, Faisella said. We need to send word to Lord Mandragoran and to Thakandar. This could involve them, too. An attempt to bring down all 4 battlefronts at once in a coordinated attack. I will see it done, Saerin said, moving toward the tent flaps. For now, I agree with Mother. Bryn must be relieved. One by one, the others nodded. It was not a formal vote in the hall, but it would do. Beside the table, Gareth Bryn sat down. Poor man. He was no doubt shaken, worried. Unexpectedly, he smiled. General? Egwene asked. Thank you, Bryn said, looking relaxed. For what? I feared I was losing my mind, Mother. I kept seeing what I'd done. I left thousands of men to die. But it wasn't me. It wasn't me. Egwene, Gawain said. He covered his pain well. The army. If Bryn has been forced to lead us toward danger, we need to change our command structure immediately. Bring in my commanders, Bryn said. I will relinquish control to them. And if they have been corrupted as well? Doacine asked. I agree, Egwene said. This smells of one of the Forsaken. Perhaps Mugadin. Lord Bryn, if you were to fall in this fight, she'd know that your commanders would be next to take charge. They might have the same faulty instincts that you do. Doacine shook her head. Who can we trust? Any bloody man or woman we put in command could have suffered compulsion. We may have to lead ourselves, Faisella said. Getting to a man who cannot channel would be easier than a sister who would sense channeling and notice a woman with the ability. We are more likely to be clean. But who among us has the knowledge of battlefield tactics? Farana asked. I consider myself well read enough to oversee plans, but to make them? We will be better than someone who may have been corrupted, Faisella said. No, Egwene said, pulling herself up on Gawain's arm. Then what? Gawain asked. Egwene clenched her teeth. Then what? She knew of only one man she could trust not to have been compelled, at least not by Mogadine. A man who was immune to the effects of Saidar and Saidine. We will have to put our armies under the command of Pt.14, she said. May the light watch over us.
Chapter 32. A Yellow Flower Spider. The Damani held open a hole in the floor for Matt. It looked down on the battlefield itself. Matt rubbed his chin, still impressed, though he'd been using these holes for the last hour or so as he countered the trap that Bryn had laid for Egwene's armies. He had sent in additional banners of Shanshan cavalry to reinforce both flanks of his troops at the river, and additional Damani to counter the Sharan channelers and stem the flood of Trollocs pressing against the defenders. Of course, this still wasn't as good as being down on the battlefield himself. Maybe he should go out again and do a little more fighting. He glanced at Tuon, who sat on a throne, a massive 10-foot-tall throne, at one side of the command building. Tuon narrowed her eyes at him as if she could see right into his thoughts. She's Aes Sedai, Matt told himself. Oh, she can't channel. She hasn't let herself learn yet. She's bloody one of them anyway. And I married her. She was something incredible, though. He felt a thrill each time she gave orders. She did it so naturally. Elaine and Nynaeve could take lessons. Tuon did look very nice on that throne. Matt let his gaze linger on her, and that earned him a scowl, which was downright unfair. If a man couldn't leer at his wife, who could he leer at? Matt turned back to the battlefield. Nice trick, he said, stooping down to stick his hand through the hole. They were high up. If he fell, he'd have time to hum 3 verses of She Has No Ankles That I Can See before he hit. Maybe an extra round of the chorus. This one learned it, the Suldam said, referring to her new Damani, from watching the weaves of the Aes Sedai. The Suldam, Katrona, almost choked on the words Aes Sedai. Matt couldn't blame her. Those could be tough words to speak. He didn't look too hard at the Damani, nor the tattoos of flowering branches on her cheeks, reaching from the back of her head like hands to cup her face. Matt was responsible for her being captured. It was better than her fighting for the shadow, wasn't it? Blood and bloody ashes, he thought to himself. You are doing a fine job of persuading Tuon not to use Damani, Pt.14, capturing one yourself. It was unnerving how quickly the Sharn woman had taken to her captivity. The Suldam had all remarked upon it. Barely a moment of struggle, then complete subservience. They expected a newly captured Damani to take months to train properly, yet this one had been ready within hours. Katrona practically beamed, as if she were personally responsible for the Sharn woman's temperament. That hole was remarkable. Matt stood right on the edge, looking down at the world, counting off the banners and squadrons as he marked them in his head. What would Clausen Bayer have done with one of these, he wondered. Maybe the Battle of Kolasar would have turned out differently. He'd have never lost his cavalry in the marsh, that's for certain. Matt's forces continued to hold back the shadow at the eastern border of Kandor, but he was not pleased with the current situation. The nature of Bryn's trap had been subtle, as hard to see as a yellow flower spider crouching on a petal. That's how Matt had known. It had taken true military genius to put the army into such a bad situation without it looking like the army was in a bad situation. That sort of thing didn't happen by accident. Matt had lost more men than he wanted to count. His people were pressed up against the river, and Demandred, despite continuing to rave about the Dragon Reborn, was continually testing Matt's defenses, trying to find a weak spot, sending out a heavy cavalry raid against one side, then an attack from Sharn archers and a Trolloc charge on the other. Consequently, Matt had to keep a close eye on Demandred's movements to be able to counter them in time. Night was coming soon. Would the shadow pull back? The Trollocs could fight into the darkness, but those Sharans probably couldn't. Matt gave another sequence of orders, and messengers galloped through gateways to deliver them. It seemed like only moments passed before his troops below responded. So fast, Matt said. This will change the world, General Golgon said. Messengers can respond instantly. Commanders can watch their battles and plan in the moment. Matt grunted in agreement. I'll bet it still takes all bloody evening to get dinner from the mess tent, though. Golgon actually smiled. It was like seeing a boulder crack in half. Tell me, General, Tuan said, what is your assessment of our consort's abilities? I don't know where you found this one, greatest one, but he is a diamond of great worth. I have watched him these last hours as he rescued the forces of the White Tower. For all of his unconventional style, I have rarely seen a battle commander as gifted as he. Tuan did not smile, but he could see from her eyes that she was pleased. They were nice eyes. And actually, with Golgon not acting so gruff, perhaps this wouldn't be such a bad place to be after all. Thanks, Matt said under his breath to Golgon as they both leaned over to study the field below. I consider myself a man of truth, my prince, Golgon said, rubbing his chin with a calloused finger. You will serve the Crystal Throne well. It would be a shame to see you assassinated too early. I will make certain that the first I send after you are newly trained, so that you may stop them with ease. Matt felt his mouth drop open. The man said it with perfect frankness, almost affection, as if he were planning to do Matt a favor by trying to kill him. The Trollocs here, he pointed at a group of them far below, will pull back soon. I concur, Golgon said. Matt rubbed his chin. We'll have to see what Demandra does with them. I'm concerned that the Sharans may try to slip some of their Marath Damani into our camp during the night. They show a remarkable dedication to their cause, or a bloody foolish disregard for self-preservation. Aes Sedai and Suldam weren't particularly timid, but they were generally cautious. The Sharan channelers were anything but.
Hey, Gardner, how you doing, bro?
Give me some Damani to
well.
create lights for the river, Matt said. And put the camp on lockdown, with a ring of Damani spaced through camp to watch for channeling. Nobody channels, not even to light a bloody candle. The Aes Sedai may not like this, General Golgon said. He too hesitated upon using the words Aes Sedai. They had started using the term instead of Marath Damani by Matt's order, one that he'd expected Tuan to rescind. She had not. Figuring that woman out was going to be a real pleasure if they both survived this bloody mess. Ty Lee entered the room. Tall and with a scarred face, the dark-skinned woman walked with the confidence of a long-time soldier. She prostrated herself before Tuan, her clothing bloodied and her armor dented. Her legion had taken a beating today, and she probably felt like a rug did after a good wife had been at it. I'm worried about our position here. Matt turned back and squatted down, looking through the hole. As he predicted, the Trollocs had begun to fall back. In what way? General Golgon asked. We've run our channelers to the bone, Matt said, and we're backed up against the river. A difficult position to defend long-term, especially against such a huge army. If they channel some gateways and move part of the Sharan army to this side of the river in the night, they could crush us. I see what you mean, Golgon said, shaking his head. Given their strength, they will continue to wear us down until we are so weak they can throw a noose around us and tighten it. Matt looked directly at Golgon. I think it's time we abandon this position. I agree. That seems to be our only reasonable course of action, General Golgon said, nodding. Why not choose a battlefield more to our advantage? Will your friends from the White Tower agree to a retreat? Let's see, Matt said,
a while back.
Straightening all the way up. Someone send for Egwene and the sisters. They will not come, Tuan said. The Aes Sedai will not meet with us here. I doubt this Amerlin will accept me into her camp, not with the protections I would require. Fine. Matt waved toward the gateway in the floor, which the Demani was closing. We'll use a gateway and talk through it like a door. Tuan made no specific objection, so Matt sent the messengers. It took a little arranging, but Egwene seemed to like the idea well enough. Tuan entertained herself during the wait by having her throne moved to the other side of the room. Matt had no idea why. She then proceeded to begin annoying Min. And this one? Tuan asked as a lanky member of the Blood entered and bowed himself. He'll marry soon, Min said. You will give me the omen first, Tuan said. Then interpretation if you desire. I know exactly what this one means, Min protested. She had been set on a smaller throne beside that of Tuan. The girl was so decked in fine cloth and lace that she could have been mistaken for a mouse hiding in a bale of silk. Sometimes I know immediately, and you will give the omen first, Tuan said, her tone unchanged. And you will refer to me as Greatest One. It is a high honor that you are given to speak with me directly. Do not let the Prince of the Ravens' attitude prove a model for your own. Min quieted, though she didn't look cowed. She'd spent too long around Aes Sedai to let Tuan bully her. That gave Matt pause. He had an inkling of what Tuan might be capable of if she grew displeased with Min. He loved her, like he was pretty sure he did, but he also let himself be a little afraid of her. He'd have to keep watch so that Tuan didn't decide to educate Min. The omen for this man, Min said, controlling her tone with, it seemed, some difficulty, is white lace trailing in a pond. I know that it will mean his marriage in the near future. Tuan nodded. She wiggled her fingers at Selusha. The man they were discussing was of the low blood, not of a high enough rank to speak directly to Tuan. His head was down so close to the ground as he bowed that it seemed that he had become fascinated with beetles and was trying to collect a specimen. Lord Gokhan of the Blood, Selusha voiced, is to be moved to the front line.
This is a 2 grandma.
He is forbidden to marry until the end of this conflict. The omens have spoken that he will live long enough to find a wife, and so he will be protected. Min grimaced, then opened her mouth, probably to object that it didn't work that way. Matt caught her eye and shook his head, and she backed down. Tuan brought in the next, a young soldier not of the blood. The woman had fair skin and not a bad face, though Matt couldn't see much else beneath that armor. Men's armor and women's armor didn't actually look much different, which he found a shame. Matt had asked the Shongshan armorer if certain areas of a female breastplate shouldn't be emphasized, so to speak, and the armorer had looked at him like he was a half-wit. Right, these people had no sense of morality. A fellow needed to know if he was fighting a woman on the battlefield. It was only right.
Nice.
As Min gave her omens, Matt settled back in his chair, putting his boots up on the map table, and fishing in his pocket for his pipe. She was rather fine-looking, that soldier, though he could not see some of the important parts. She might make a good match for Tomanis. That fellow spent entirely too little time looking at women. He was shy around them, Tomanis was. Matt ignored the looks of those nearby as he tipped his chair back onto 2 legs, set his heels on the table, and packed his pipe. It could be so touchy. He wasn't certain what he thought of so many Shongshan women being soldiers. A lot of them seemed like Brigitta, which wouldn't be so bad. Matt would rather spend an evening in the tavern with her than half the men he knew. You will be executed, Tuan voiced through Selusha, speaking to the soldier. Matt nearly fell off of his chair. He grabbed the table in front of him, the chair's front legs slamming down on the ground. What? Min demanded. No! You saw the sign of the white boar, Tuan said. I don't know the meaning. The boar is the symbol of one Handoin, one of my rivals in Shongshan, Tuan explained patiently. The white boar is an omen of danger, perhaps betrayal. This woman works for him, or will in the future. You can't just execute her. Tuan blinked once, looking straight at Min. The room seemed to drop into shade, feeling colder. Matt shivered. He didn't like it when Tuan got like this. That stare of hers. It seemed like the stare of another person. A person without compassion. A statue had more life to it. Nearby, Salusha wiggled her fingers at Tuan. Tuan glanced at them, then nodded. You are my truth speaker, she said to Min, almost reluctantly. You may correct me in public. Do you see error in my decisions? Yes, I do, Min said, not missing a beat. You do not use my skills as you should. And how should I? Tuan asked. The soldier who had been given a death sentence continued lying prostrate. She didn't object. She was not of a rank that could address the Empress. She was lowly enough that speaking to someone else in Tuan's presence would be a breach of honor. What someone may do is not grounds to kill them, Min said. I intend no disrespect, but if you are going to kill people because of what I tell you, I will not speak. You can be made to speak. Try it, Min said softly. Matt started. Bloody ashes. She looked as cold as Tuan had a moment ago. Let us see how the pattern treats you, Empress, if you torture the bearer of omens. Instead, Tuan smiled. You take to this well.
You have a good hunt
Explain to me what you desire, bringer of omens. I will tell you my viewings, Min said. But from now on, the interpretations, whether my own or those you read into the images, are to be kept quiet. Between the two of us would be best. You are allowed to watch someone because of what I've said, but not to punish them. Not unless you catch them doing something. Set this woman free. Let it be so, Tuan said. You are free, she voiced through Salusha. Walk in loyalty to the crystal throne. You will be watched. The woman bowed lower, then retreated from the room, head down. Matt caught a trickle of sweat running down the side of her face. So she wasn't a statue. He turned back to Tuan and Min. They were still staring at one another. No knives, but he felt as if someone had been stabbed. If only Min would learn a little respect. One of these days he was going to have to haul her away from the Shonchan by her collar, a step in front of the headsman. He was certain. A gateway suddenly split the air on the side of the room where Tuan had indicated it should go. Suddenly it occurred to Matt why she had moved her throne. If that demoni had been captured and forced to say where Tuan was sitting, an Aes Sedai could have opened a gateway where she sat, slicing her in two. It was so unlikely it was laughable. An Aes Sedai could sooner fly than kill someone who wasn't a dark friend. But Tuan took no chances. The gateway opened to reveal the hall of the tower, seated in a tent. Behind them, Egwene sat upon a large chair. The Amerlin seat itself, Matt realized. Blood and ashes. She had them fetch it. Egwene looked exhausted, though she was doing a good job of hiding it. The others were no better. The Aes Sedai had been strained to their limits. If she were a soldier, he'd never send her into battle. Blood and bloody ashes. If he had a soldier with that cast to his skin and that look in his eyes, that would send the fellow to bed rest for a week. We are curious to know the purpose of this meeting, Seren said calmly. Sylviana sat in a smaller chair by Egwene's side, and the other sisters were organized by Aja. Some were missing, including one of the yellows, by Matt's best guess. Tuan nodded to Matt. He was to lead this meeting. He tipped his hat to her, which earned him a half-raised eyebrow. Her dangerous look was gone, although she was still Empress. Aes Sedai, Matt said, standing up and tipping his hat to the sitters. The Crystal Throne appreciates you coming to your bloody senses and letting us direct the battle. Sylviana's eyes bulged as if someone had just stepped on her foot. From the corner of his eye, Matt caught a hint of a smile on Tuan's lips. Blood and bloody ashes, both women should know better than to encourage him so. You are as eloquent as ever, Matt, Egwene said dryly. Do you still have your pet fox? I do, Matt said. He's snuggled up nice and warm. Take care of him, Egwene said. I would not see you suffer Gareth Bryn's fate. So it was really compulsion, Matt asked. Egwene had sent him word. As near as we can tell, Saren said. Nynaeve Sedai can see the weaves on someone's mind, I'm told, but none of the rest of us can. We have our healers looking at Bryn, said a stocky Damani Aes Sedai. For now, we cannot trust any battle plans that he touched, at least not until we determine how long he's been under the Shadow's thumb. Matt nodded. That sounds good. Also, we need to withdraw our forces from the ford. Why? Lelaine demanded. We have stabilized here. Not well enough, Matt said. I don't like this terrain, and we shouldn't have to fight where we don't want to. I hesitate to give an extra inch to the Shadow, Saren said. A pace given up now could earn us 2 at the dawn, Matt replied. General Galgon murmured in agreement, and Matt realized that he'd quoted Hawkwing. Saren frowned. The others seemed to be letting her lead the meeting. Egwene mostly stayed out of it, fingers laced before her, sitting at the back. I should probably tell you, Saren said, that our great captain was not the only one targeted. Davram Bashir and Lord Agilmar also tried to lead their respective armies to destruction. Elaine Sedai did well in her battle, destroying a large force of Trollocs, but she was only able to do so because of the Black Tower's arrival. The Borderlanders were crushed, losing nearly 2/3 of their numbers. Matt felt a chill. 2/3? Light. They were among the best troops the Light had. Lan? Lord Mandragoran lives, Saren said. Well, that was something. And what of that army up in the Blight? Lord Ituralda fell in battle, Saren replied. No one quite seems to know what happened to him. This was planned very well, Matt said, mind racing. Blood and bloody ashes. They tried to crush all 4 battlefronts at once. I can't imagine the amount of coordination that would take. As I noted, Egwene said softly, we must be very careful. Keep that fox of yours near at all times. What does Elaine want to do? Matt said. Isn't she in charge? Elaine Sedai is currently helping the Borderlanders, Saren said. She has instructed us that Shinar is all but lost, and is having the Ashaman bring Lord Mandragoran's army to a place of safety. Tomorrow she plans to move her army through gateways and hold the Trollocs in the Blight. We need to make a unified stand. He hesitated. Could we bring her through one of these gateways? At least contact her? There seemed to be no good objection. In a short time, another gateway opened in the tent with Egwene and the sitters. Elaine strode through, thick with child, eyes practically on fire. Behind her, Matt caught a glimpse of soldiers with slumped postures, trudging across a dim evening field. Light, Elaine said. Matt, what is it you want? You've won your battle? Matt asked. Barely, but yes. The Trollocs in Kyrian have been destroyed. The city is safe as well. Matt nodded. I need to withdraw from our position here. Fine, Elaine said. Perhaps we can meld your force with what's left of the Borderlanders. I want to do more than that, Elaine, Matt said, stepping forward. This ploy the Shadow tried. It was clever, Elaine. Bloody clever. We're bloodied and almost broken. We don't have the luxury of fighting on multiple battlefronts anymore. What then? A last stand, Matt said softly. All of us, together, at one place where the terrain favors us. Elaine quieted, and someone brought her a chair to sit beside Egwene. She maintained the posture of a queen, but her disheveled hair and clothing burned in several places indicated what she'd been through. Matt could smell smoke coming from her battlefield, where the gateway was still open. That sounds desperate, Elaine finally said. We are desperate, Saren said. We should ask our commanders, Elaine trailed off. If there are any we can trust not to be under compulsion. There's only one, Matt said grimly, meeting her eyes. And he's telling you we are finished if we continue as we have. The earlier plan was a good enough one, but after what we lost today, Elaine, we're dead unless we choose one place to stand, gather together, and fight. One last toss of the dice. Elaine sat for a time. Where? She finally asked. Tarvolin? Gowan asked. No, Matt said. They just besiege it and move on. It can't be a city where we can get boxed in. We need a territory that will work in our favor, also a land that can't feed the Trollocs.
Right back.
Well, a place in the borderlands should work for that, Elaine said with a grimace. Land's army burned almost every city or field they passed to deny the Shadow resources. Maps, Matt said, waving. Someone get me maps. We need a location in southern Shinar or Arafel. Someplace close enough that the Shadow will see it as tempting, a place to fight us all at once. Matt, Elaine asked, won't that be giving them what they want? A chance to wipe us out? Yes, Matt said softly as the Aes Sedai sent over maps. These had markings on them, notations that appeared to be in General Bryn's hand, judging by what they said. We have to be a tempting target. We have to draw them in, face them, and either defeat them or be crushed. A drawn-out fight would serve the Shadow. Once enough Trollocs reached southern lands, there would be no containing them. He had to win or lose quickly. One last toss of the dice indeed. Matt pointed at a location on the maps, a place that Bryn had annotated. It had a good water supply, a nice meeting of hills and rivers. This place. Marilor. You've been using it as a supply dump? Saren chuckled softly. And so we go back where we began, do we? It does have some small fortifications, Elaine said. The men built a palisade on one side, and we could expand it. It's what we need, Matt said, envisioning a battle there. Marilor would put them where the two major Trolloc armies could come in, try to crush the humans between them. That would be tempting, but the terrain would be wonderful for Matt to use. Yes, it would be like the Battle of Priya Narrows. If he put archers along those cliffs, no, dragons. And if he could give the Aes Sedai a few days of rest, Priya Narrows. He had counted on using a large river to trap the Hammarian army at the mouth of the Narrows. But as he sprung the trap, the blasted river dried up on him. The Hammarians had dammed it up on the other side of the Narrows. They had stepped right over the riverbed and got clean away. That's a lesson I won't forget. This will do, Matt said, placing his hand on the map. Elaine? Let it be done, Elaine said. I hope you know what you're doing, Matt. As she spoke, the dice started tumbling inside his head. Galad closed Trom's eyes. He'd searched the battlefield north of Kyrian for over an hour to find him. Trom had bled out, and only a few corners of his cloak were still white. Galad ripped the officer's knots off his shoulder, amazingly unsoiled, and stood up. He felt weary to the bone. He started back across the battlefield, passing heaps of the dead. The crows and the ravens had come. They blanketed the landscape behind him. An undulating, quivering blackness that coated the ground like mold. From a distance, it seemed as if the ground had been burned. There were so many carrion birds. Occasionally, Galad passed men like himself who sifted through the corpses for friends. There were surprisingly few looters. You had to watch for those on a battlefield. Elaine had caught a few trying to sneak out of Kyrian. She'd threatened to hang them. She's grown harder, Galad thought, trudging back toward camp. His boots felt like lead on his feet. That is good. As a child, she had often made decisions with her heart. She was a queen now, and acted it. Now, if only he could write her moral compass. She wasn't a bad person, but Galad wished that she, like other monarchs, could see as clearly as he did. He was beginning to accept that they didn't. He was beginning to accept that it was all right, so long as they tried their best. Whatever he had inside of him that allowed him to see the right of things was obviously a gift of the light, and holding others to scorn because they had not been born with it was wrong, just as it would be wrong to hold a man to scorn because he had been born with only one hand, and was therefore an inferior swordsman. Many of the living he passed sat on the ground in the rare spots where there were no corpses and no blood. These men did not look like the victors of a battle, though the arrival of the Ashaman had saved this day. The trick with the lava had given Elaine's army the breather it needed to regroup and attack. That battle had been swift, but brutal. Trollocs did not surrender, and they couldn't be allowed to break and flee. So Galad and the others had fought, bled, and died long past when it was obvious they would be victorious. The Trollocs were dead now. The remaining men sat and stared out at the blanket of corpses, as if numbed by the prospect of searching out the few living among the many thousands dead. The setting sun and choking clouds made the light red, and gave faces a bloody cast. Galad eventually reached the long hill that had marked the division between the two battlefields.
One more hit from the
He
pen,
climbed
and
it
then
slowly,
we'll start
forcing down thoughts
round
of how
two.
good a bed would feel, or a pallet on the floor, or some flat rock in an out-of-the-way place where he could roll up in his cloak. The fresher air atop the hill shocked him. He'd been smelling blood and death for so long that now it was the clean air that smelled wrong. He shook his head, walking past tired borderlanders who were trudging through gateways. The Ashaman had gone to hold off the Trollocs to the north, so Lord Mandragoran's armies could escape. From what Galad heard, the Borderlander armies were a fraction of what they had been. The betrayal of the great captains had been felt most deeply by Lord Mandragoran and his men. It sickened Galad, for this battle had not gone easily for him or anyone else with Elaine. It had been horrible. And as bad as it had been, the fight had gone more poorly for the Borderlanders. Galad kept his stomach settled with difficulty as his view from atop the hill let him see just how many carrion birds had come to feast. The Dark One's minions fell, and the Dark One's minions glutted themselves. Galad eventually found Elaine. Her passionate words, being spoken to Tamal Thor and Arganda, took him by surprise. "Matt is right," she said. "The field of Merilor is a good battlefield. Light, I wish we could give the people more time to rest. We'll have only a few days, a week at most, before the Trollocs reach Merilor behind us." She shook her head. "We should have seen those Sharans coming. When the deck starts to look like it's stacked against the Dark One, of course he will just add a few new cards to the game." Galad's pride demanded that he remain standing as he listened to Elaine talk to the other commanders. For once, however, his pride lost out, and he settled down on a stool and slumped forward. "Galad," Elaine said, "you really should allow one of the Ashaman to wash away your fatigue. Your insistence upon treating them like outcasts is foolish." Galad straightened up. "It has nothing to do with the Ashaman," he snapped. Too argumentative. He was tired. "This fatigue reminds me of what we lost today. It is an exhaustion my men must endure, and so I will, lest I forget just how tired they are and push them too far." Elaine frowned at him. He had stopped worrying that his words offended her long ago. It seemed he couldn't claim that a day was pleasant or his tea warm without her taking offense somehow. It would have been nice if Abara hadn't run off. That man was a leader, one of the few that Galad had ever met. that one could actually talk to without worrying that he'd take offense. Perhaps the Two Rivers would be a good place for the White Cloaks to settle. Of course, there was something of a history of bad blood between them. He could work on that. I called them White Cloaks, he thought to himself a moment later. Inside my head, that's how I thought of the children just now. It had been a long time since he'd done that by accident. Your Majesty, Arganda said. He stood beside Logain, the leader of the Ashaman, and Habian Norel, the new commander of the Winged Guard. Talmanas of the Band of the Red Hand trudged up with a few commanders from the Saldaeans and the Legion of the Dragon. Elder Hammon of the Ogier sat on the ground a short distance away.
Oh, yeah.
He stared off toward the sunset, seeming dazed. Your Majesty, Arganda continued, I realize you consider this a great victory. It is a great victory, Elaine said. We must persuade the men to see it that way. Not 8 hours ago, I assumed that our entire army would be slaughtered. We won. At a cost of half of our troops, Arganda said softly. I will count that a victory, Elaine insisted. We were expecting complete destruction. The only victor today is the butcher, Narelle said softly. He looked haunted. No, Tam Althor said. She's right. The troops have to understand what their losses earned. We must treat this as a victory. It must be recorded that way in the histories, and the soldiers must be convinced to see it so. That is a lie, Galad found himself saying. It is not, Althor said. We lost many friends today, like that we all did. Focusing on death, however, is what the Dark One wants us to do. I dare you to tell me I'm wrong. We must look and see light, not shadow, or we'll all be pulled under. By winning here, Elaine said, deliberately emphasizing the word, we earn a reprieve. We can gather at Marilor, entrench there, and make our last stand in our strength against the shadow.
Get me another TV so I can actually play my PlayStation.
We're going to go through this again, aren't we? Yes, Elaine said reluctantly. Galad looked out over the fields of the dead, then shivered. Marilor will be worse. Light help us. It's going to get worse. Chapter 33. The Prince's Tabak. Perrin chased Slayer through the skies. He leaped from a churning silver-black cloud, Slayer a blur before him in the charred sky. The air pulsed with the rhythm of lightning bolts and furious winds. Scent after scent assailed Perrin, with no logic behind them. Mud and tear, a burning pie, rotting garbage, a death lily flower. Slayer landed in the cloud ahead and shifted, turning around in an eye blink, bow drawn. The arrow loosed so quickly the air cracked, but Perrin managed to slap it down with his hammer.
When I had my place,
He landed on the same thunderheaded Slayer, imagining footing beneath him, and the vapors of the storm cloud became solid.
Origins.
Perrin charged forward through a churning dark gray fog, the top layer of the cloud, and attacked. They clashed, Slayer summoning a shield and sword. Perrin's hammer beat a rhythm against that shield, pounding alongside the booming of thunder. A crash with each blow. Slayer spun away to flee, but Perrin managed to snatch the edge of his cloak. As Slayer attempted to shift away, Perrin imagined them staying put. He knew they would. It was not a possibility, it was. They both fuzzed for a moment, then returned to the cloud. Slayer growled, then swept his sword backward, shearing off the tip of his cloak and freeing himself. He turned to face Perrin, stalking to the side, sword held in wary hands. The cloud trembled beneath them, and a flash of phantom lightning lit the misty vapor at their feet. You become increasingly annoying, wolf pup, Slayer said. You've never fought a wolf that can fight you back, Perrin said. You've killed them from afar. The slaughter was easy. Now you've tried to hunt a prey who has teeth, Slayer. Slayer snorted. You're like a boy with his father's sword. dangerous, but completely unaware of why or how to use your weapons. We'll see who, Perrin began, but Slayer lunged, sword out. Perrin braced himself, imagining the sword growing dull, the air becoming thick to slow it, his skin turning hard enough to turn the weapon aside. A second later, Perrin found himself tumbling through the air. Fool, he thought. He'd focused so much on the attack that he hadn't been ready when Slayer changed their footing. Perrin passed through the rumbling cloud, breaking out into the sky below, wind tugging at his clothing. He prepared himself, waiting for the hail of arrows to follow him down out of the cloud. Slayer could be so predictable. No arrows came. Perrin fell for a few moments, then cursed and twisted to see a storm of arrows shooting up from the ground below. He shifted seconds before they passed through where he'd been. Perrin appeared in the air 100 feet to the side, still falling. He didn't bother to slow himself. He hit the ground, increasing his body's strength to deal with the shock of the blow. The ground cracked. A ring of dust blew out from him. The storm was far worse than it had been. The ground here, they were in the south somewhere, with overgrown brush and tangled vines growing up the sides of the trees, was pocked and torn. Lightning lashed repeatedly, so frequent that he could hardly count to 3 without seeing a bolt. There was no rain, but the landscape crumbled. Entire hills would suddenly disintegrate. The one just to Perrin's left dissolved like an enormous pile of dust, a trail of dirt and sand streaking out into the wind. Perrin leaped through the debris-laden sky, hunting Slayer. Had the man shifted back up to Sheol Ghul? No. 2 more arrows pierced the sky, heading for Perrin. Slayer was very good at making them ignore the wind. Perrin slapped the arrows aside and hurled himself in Slayer's direction. He spotted the man on a peak of rock, ground crumbling to either side of him, and whipping into the air. Perrin came down with hammer swinging. Slayer shifted away, of course, and the hammer struck stone with a sound like thunder. Perrin growled. Slayer was too quick. Perrin was fast, too. Sooner or later, one of them would slip. One slip would be enough. He caught sight of Slayer bounding away and followed. When Perrin jumped off the next hilltop, the stones shattered behind him, rising up into the wind. The pattern was weakening. Beyond that, his will was much stronger now that he was here in the flesh. He no longer had to worry about entering the dream too strongly and losing himself. He had entered it as strongly as one could. And so when Perrin moved, the landscape shuddered around him. The next leap showed him sea ahead. They had traveled much farther to the south than Perrin had realized. Were they in Ilion? Tyr? Slayer hit the beach where water crashed against rocks. The sand, if there had been any, had been blown away. The land seemed to be returning to a primal state. Grass ripped free, soil eroded, leaving only stone and crashing waves. Perrin landed beside Slayer. For once, there was no shifting. Both men were intent on the fight, the swings of hammer and sword. Metal clanged against metal. Perrin nearly landed a hit, his hammer brushing Slayer's clothing. He heard a curse, but the next moment Slayer was rounding from his dodge with a large axe in hand. Perrin braced himself and took it on the side, hardening his skin. The axe didn't draw blood, not with Perrin braced as he was, but it did carry a huge amount of force behind it. The blow tossed Perrin out over the sea. Slayer appeared above him a second later, plunging down with that axe. Perrin caught it on his hammer as he fell, but the force of the blow flung him downward toward the ocean. He commanded the water to recede. It rushed away, churning and bubbling, as if pursued by a powerful wind. Perrin righted himself as he fell, landing and cracking the still wet, rocky bottom of the bay. Seawater rose high to either side of him, a circular wall some 30 feet high. Slayer crashed down nearby. The man was panting from the exertion of their fight. Good. Perrin's own fatigue manifested as a deep burning in his muscles. I'm glad you were there, Slayer said, raising his sword to his shoulder, his shield vanishing. I had so hoped that when I appeared to kill the dragon, you would interfere. What are you, Luke? Perrin asked, wary, shifting to the side, keeping opposite Slayer in the circle of stone with walls of sea. What are you really?
Right back. And
Slayer
then we'll
prowled to the
start
side,
round two.
talking, Baron knew, to lull his prey. I've seen him, Slayer said softly. The Dark One. The Great Lord, as some would call him. Both terms are gross, almost insulting. Understatements. Do you really think he'll reward you? Perrin spat. How can you not realize that once you've done what he wishes of you, he'll just discard you as he has so many? Slayer laughed. Did he discard the Forsaken when they failed and were imprisoned with him in the boar? He could have slaughtered them all and kept their souls in eternal torment. Did he? Perrin didn't reply. The Dark One does not discard useful tools, Slayer said. Fail him, and he may exact punishment, but he never discards. He's like a good wife with her balls of tangled yarn and broken tea kettles hidden away in the bottoms of baskets, waiting for the right moment to return them to usefulness. That is where you're wrong, Ibarra. A mere human might kill a tool who succeeds, fearing that the tool will threaten him. That is not the Dark One's way. He will reward me. Perrin opened his mouth to reply, and Slayer shifted right in front of him to attack, thinking him distracted. Perrin vanished, and Slayer struck only air. The man spun about, sword splitting the air, but Perrin had shifted to the opposite side. Small sea creatures with many arms undulated near his feet, confused at the sudden lack of water. Something large and dark swam through the shadowy water behind Slayer. You never answered my question, he said. What are you? I'm bold, Slayer said, striding forward. And I'm tired of being afraid. In this life, there are predators and there are prey. Often the predators themselves become food for someone else. The only way to survive is to move up the chain, become the hunter. That's why you kill wolves? Slayer smiled a dangerous smile, his face in shadows. With the storm clouds above and the high walls of water, it was dim here at the bottom, though the strange light of the wolf train pierced this place, if in a muted way. Wolves and men are the finest hunters in this world, Slayer said softly. Kill them, and you elevate yourself above them. Not all of us have the privilege of growing up in a comfortable home with a warm hearth and laughing siblings. Perrin and Slayer rounded one another, shadows blending, lightning blasts above shimmering through the water. If you knew my life, Slayer said, you'd howl. The hopelessness, the agony. I found my way, my power. In this place, I am king. He leaped across the space, his form a blur. Perrin prepared to swing, but Slayer didn't draw his sword. He crashed into Perrin, throwing them both into the wall of water. The sea churned and bubbled around them. Darkness. Perrin created light, somehow making the rocks at his feet glow. Slayer had hold of his cloak with one hand and was swinging at him in the dark water, his sword trailing bubbles but moving as quickly as in the air. Perrin yelled, bubbles coming from his mouth. He tried to block, but both his arms moved lethargically. In that frozen moment, Perrin tried to imagine the water not impeding him, but his mind rejected that thought. It wasn't natural. It couldn't be. In desperation, Slayer's sword nearly close enough to bite, Perrin froze the water solid around both of them. Doing so nearly crushed him, but it held Slayer still for a precious moment while Perrin oriented himself. He made his cloak vanish so he wouldn't take Slayer with him, then shifted away. Perrin landed on the rocky beach beside a steep hillside that was half broken away by the power of the sea. He fell on hands and knees, gasping. Water streamed from his beard. His mind felt numb. He had trouble thinking the water away from him to dry himself. What's happening? He thought, trembling. Around him the storm raged, the bark ripping from tree trunks, their limbs already stripped away. He was just so tired, exhausted. How long had it been since he slept? Weeks had passed in the real world, But it couldn't actually have been weeks here, could it? The sea boiled, churning. Perrin turned. He'd kept his hammer somehow, and he raised it to face Slayer. The waters continued to move, but nothing came from them. Suddenly, behind him, the hills split in half. Perrin felt something heavy hit him in the shoulder, like a punch. He fell to his knees, twisting to see the hillside broken in two, Slayer standing on the other side, knocking another arrow to his bow. Perrin shifted, desperate, pain belatedly flaring up his side and across his body.
All I'm saying is that battles are being fought, Mandevwin said, and we are not there. Battles are always being fought somewhere, Vanin replied, leaning back against the wall outside a warehouse in Tarvalon. Fail listened to them with half an ear. We've fought our share of them. All I'm saying is that I'm pleased to avoid this particular one. People are dying, Mandevwin said, disapproving. This is not simply a battle, Vanin. It is Tarmangaiden itself. Which means nobody is paying us, Vanin said. Mandevwin sputtered. Paying? To fight the last battle? You knave. This battle means life itself. Fail smiled as she looked over the supply ledgers. The two red arms idled by the doorway as servants wearing the flame of Tarvalon loaded Fail's caravan. Behind them, the white tower rose over the city. At first, she had been annoyed by the banter, but the way Vanin poked at the other man reminded her of Gilber, one of her father's quartermasters back in Saldeia. Now, Mandevwin, Vanin said, you hardly sound like a mercenary at all. What if Lord Matt heard you? Lord Matt will fight, said Mandevwin. When he has to, Vanin said. We don't have to. Look, these supplies are important, right? And someone has to guard them, right? Here we are. I just do not see why this job requires us. I should be helping Talmanis lead the band, and you lot, you should be guarding Lord Matt. Fail could almost hear the end of that line, the one they were all thinking. You should be guarding Lord Matt from those Shonshan. The soldiers had taken in stride Matt's disappearance, then his reappearance with the Shonshan. Apparently they expected this kind of behavior from Lord Matron Cawthon. Fail had a squad of 50 of the band's best, including Captain Mandevwin, Lieutenant Sandeep, and several Red Arms who came highly recommended by Talmanis. None of them knew their true purpose in guarding the Horn of Valir. She would have brought 10 times this number if she could. As it was, 50 was suspicious enough. Those 50 were the band's very best, some pulled from command positions. They would have to do. We're not going far, Fail thought, checking the next page of the ledgers. She had to look as if she were concerned about the supplies. Why am I so worried? She needed only to carry the horn to the field of Merilor, now that Cawthon had finally appeared. She'd already run 3 caravans from other locations using the same guards, so her current job wouldn't be suspicious in the least. She'd chosen the band very deliberately. In the eyes of most, they were just mercenaries, so the least important and least trustworthy troops in the army. However, for all of her complaints about Matt, she might not know him well, but the way Perrin spoke of him was enough. He did inspire loyalty in his men. The men who found their way to Cawthon were like him. They tried to hide from duty and preferred gambling and drinking to doing anything useful, but in a pinch they'd each fight like 10 men. At Merilor, Cawthon would have good reason to check in on Mandevwin and his men. At that point, Fail could give him the horn. Of course, she also had some members of Chafail with her as guards. She wanted some people she knew for certain she could trust. Nearby, Laris, The stout mistress of the kitchens at Tar Valon came out of the warehouse, wagging a finger at several of the serving girls. The woman walked to Fail, trailed by a lanky youth with a limp, who was carrying a beat-up chest. "Something for you, my lady." Laris gestured to the trunk. "The Amerlin herself added it to your shipment as an afterthought. Something about a friend of hers from back home?" "It's Matrim Cawthon's tabac," Fail said with a grimace. When he found that the Amerlin had a store of Two Rivers leaf left, he insisted upon purchasing it. "Tabac! At a time like this!" Laris shook her head, wiping her fingers on her apron. "I remember that boy. I've known a youth or two in my day like him, always skulking around the kitchens like a stray wanting scraps. Someone ought to find something useful for him to do." "We're working on it," Fail said, as Laris's servant placed the trunk in Fail's own wagon. She winced as he let it thump down, then dusted off his hands. Laris nodded, walking back into her warehouse. Fail rested her fingers on the chest. Philosophers claimed the pattern did not have a sense of humor. The pattern and the wheel simply were. They did not care, and they did not take sides. However, Fail could not help thinking that somewhere the Creator was grinning at her. She had left home with her head full of arrogant dreams, a child thinking herself on a grand quest to find the horn. Life had knocked those out from under her, leaving her to haul herself back up. She had grown up, had started paying mind to what was really important. And now? Now the pattern, with almost casual indifference, dropped the horn of Valir into her lap. She removed her hand and pointedly refused to open the chest. She had the key, delivered to her separately, and she would check to see that the horn was really in the chest. Not now. Not until she was alone and reasonably certain she was safe. She climbed into the wagon and rested her feet on the chest. "I still don't like it," Mandevwin was saying beside the warehouse. "You don't like anything," Vanin said. "Look, the work we're doing is important. Soldiers have to eat." "I suppose that is true," Mandevwin said. "It is," a new voice added. Harnan, another red arm, joined them. Jumped to help the servants load the caravan. "Eating is wonderful," Harnan said. "And if there is an expert on the subject, Vanin, it is certainly you." Harnan was a sturdily built man with a wide face and a hawk tattooed on his cheek. Talmanis swore by the man, calling him a veteran survivor of both the six-story slaughter and Hinderstap, whatever those were. "Now, that wounds me, Harnan," Vanin said from behind. "That wounds me badly." "I doubt it," Harnan said with a laugh. "To wound you badly, an attack would first have to penetrate through fat to reach the muscle. I'm not sure Trolloc swords are long enough for that." Mandevwin laughed, and the three of them moved off. Fail went over the last few pages of the ledger, then began to climb down, to call for Sitala Anan. The woman had been acting as her assistant for these caravan runs. As she was climbing down, however, Fail noticed that not all three members of the band had moved off. Only two of them had. Portly Vanin still stood back there. She saw him and paused. Vanin immediately lumbered off toward some of the other soldiers. Had he been watching her? "Fail! Fail! Aravine says she has finished checking over the manifests for you. We can go, Fail!" Oliver scrambled eagerly into the wagon seat. He had insisted on joining the caravan, and the members of the band had persuaded her to allow it. Even Satala had suggested it would be wise to bring him. Apparently they worried that Oliver would find his way to the fighting somehow if he wasn't constantly under their watch. Fail had reluctantly set him to running errands. "All right then," Fail said, climbing back into the wagon. I suppose we can be off. The wagons lumbered into motion. She spent the entire trip out of the city trying not to look at the chest. She tried to distract herself from thinking about it, but that only brought her mind to another pressing concern. Perrin. She had seen him only briefly during a supply run to Andor. He'd warned her he might have another duty, but had been reluctant to tell her about it. Now he'd vanished. He'd made Tam steward in his place, had taken a gateway to Sheol Ghul, and had vanished. She'd asked those who'd been there, but nobody had seen him since his conversation with Rand. All would be well with him, wouldn't it? She was a soldier's daughter and a soldier's wife. She knew not to worry overly much. But a person could not help but worry a little. Perrin had been the one to suggest her as the keeper of the horn. She wondered idly if he had done it to keep her off the battlefield. She wouldn't mind terribly if he'd done so, though she would never tell him that. In fact, once this was all said and done, she would insinuate that she was offended and see how he reacted. He needed to know that she would not sit back and be coddled, even if her true name implied otherwise. Fail pulled her wagon, which was first in the caravan, onto the Jualda Bridge out of Tar Valon. About halfway across, the bridge trembled. The horses stomped and tossed their heads as Fail slowed them and glanced over her shoulder. The sight of swaying buildings in Tar Valon proved to her that the trembling wasn't just the bridge, but an earthquake. The other horses danced and whinnied, and the shaking rattled carts. "We need to move off the bridge, Lady Fail," Olver cried. "The bridge is much too long for us to get to the other side before this ends," Fail said calmly. She had suffered earthquakes in Saldaea before. "We'd be in more danger of hurting ourselves in the scramble than we will be here. This bridge is Ogier work. We're probably safer here than we'd be on solid ground." Indeed, the earthquake passed without so much as a stone being loosed from the bridge. Fail brought her horses under control and started ahead again. The light willing, the damage to the city wasn't too bad. She didn't know if earthquakes were common here. With Dragon Mount nearby, there would at least be occasional rumblings, wouldn't there? Still, the earthquake worried her. People spoke of the land becoming unstable, the groanings of the earth coming to match the breaking of the sky by lightning and thunder. She had heard more than one account of the spider web cracks that appeared in rocks, pure black, as if they extended on into eternity itself. Once the rest of the caravan left the city, Fail pulled her wagons up beside some mercenary bands, waiting their turn at an Aes Sedai for traveling. Fail could not afford to insist on preference. She had to avoid attention. So, nerve-wracking though it was, she settled down to wait. Her caravan was last in line for the day. Eventually, Aravine came up to Fail's wagon and Olver scooted over to make room for her. She patted him on the head. A lot of women responded that way to Olver, and he did seem so innocent much of the time. Fail wasn't convinced. She narrowed her eyes at Olver as he snuggled up beside Aravine. Matt seemed to have had a strong influence on the child. "I'm pleased with this shipment, my lady," Aravine said. "With this canvas, we should have enough material to put tents over the heads of most men in the army. We are still going to need leather. We know that Queen Elaine marched her men hard, and we will be getting requests for new boots." Fail nodded absently. A gateway ahead opened to Merilor, and she could see the armies still gathering. Over the last couple of days, they'd slowly limped back to lick their wounds. 3 battlefronts, 3 disasters of varying degrees. Light. The arrival of the Sharons was devastating, as was the betrayals of the great captains, including Fail's own father. The armies of the Light had lost well over a third of their forces. On the field of Merilor, commanders deliberated and their soldiers repaired armor and weapons, awaiting what would come. A final stand. We'll also need some meat, Aravine said. We should suggest some quick hunting trips using gateways over the next few days to see what we can find. Fail nodded. It was a comfort having Aravine. Though Fail still reviewed reports and visited the quartermasters, Aravine's careful attention made the job much easier, like a good sergeant who had made certain his men were in shape before an inspection. Aravine, Fail said, you haven't ever taken one of the gateways to check on your family in Amadisia. There is nothing for me there any longer, my lady. Aravine stubbornly refused to admit that she'd been a noble before being taken by the Shido. Well, at least she didn't act as some of the former Gaishain did, docile and submissive. If Aravine was determined to leave her past behind her, then Fail would gladly give her the chance. It was the least she owed the woman. As they talked, Oliver climbed down to go chat with some of his uncles among the Red Arms. Fail glanced to the side as Vannin rode past with two of the band's other scouts. He spoke jovially to them. You're misreading that look of his, Fail told herself. There's nothing suspicious about the man. You're merely jumpy because of the horn. Still, when Harnan came to ask if she needed anything, a member of the band did that every half hour. She asked him about Vannin. Vannin? Harnan said from horseback. Good fellow. He can chew your ear off griping at times, my lady, but don't let that sour you. He's our best scout. I can't imagine how, she said. I mean, he can't move quickly or quietly with that bulk, can he? He'd surprise you, my lady, Harnan said with a laugh. I like to rib him, but he really is skilled. Has he ever presented any disciplinary problems? Fail asked, trying to choose her words. Fighting? Lifting things from other men's tents?
I'll be right back.
Harnan laughed. He'll borrow your brandy if you let him, then return the flask mostly empty. And truth be told, he might have had a bit of thieving in his past, but I've never known him to fight. He's a good man. You don't need to worry about him. Some thieving in his past. Harnan, though, looked like he didn't want to talk about it any further. Thank you, she said, but she remained worried. Harnan raised a hand to his head in a kind of salute, then rode off. It was 3 more hours before an Aes Sedai came to process them. Berisha strolled over, giving the caravan a critical inspection. She was hard of features and lean of figure. The other Aes Sedai working the traveling ground had already returned to Tar Valon by this point, and the sun was dipping toward the horizon. Caravan of foodstuffs and canvas, Berisha said, examining Fail's ledger. Bound for the field of Merilor. We've sent them 7 caravans today so far. Why another? I suspect the Camelin refugees could use this as much. The field of Merilor is soon going to be a site of great battle,
Okay.
Fail said,
Round 2.
keeping her temper with difficulty. Aes Sedai did not like to be snapped at. I doubt we can oversupply it. Berisha sniffed. I say it's too much. The woman seemed chronically dissatisfied, as if annoyed at being left out of the fighting. The Amerlin disagrees with you, Fail replied. A gateway, please. The hour grows late. And if you want to talk about a waste, why not consider how you made me march all the way out of the city and wait instead of sending me straight from the White Tower grounds? The Hall of the Tower wanted a single traveling ground for large troop or supply movements to keep better control over who entered and left Tar Valon. Fail could not blame them for the precaution, even if it was frustrating sometimes. Bureaucracy was bureaucracy, and Berisha finally adopted a look of concentration in preparation for making a gateway. Before she could weave the gateway, however, the ground started to rumble. Not again, Fail thought with a sigh. Well, there were commonly smaller quakes after A series of sharp black crystal spikes split the ground nearby, jutting upward some 10 or 15 feet. One speared a red-armed horse, splashing blood up into the air as the spike went straight through both beast and man. "Bubble of evil!" Harnan called from nearby. Other crystalline spikes, some thin as a spear, others wide as a person, ripped up through the ground. Fail frantically tried to control her horses. They danced to the side, spinning her cart, nearly toppling it as she pulled on the reins. Around her, madness ruled. The spikes punched up through the ground in groups, each sharp as a razor. One wagon splintered as crystals destroyed its left side. Foodstuffs spilled to the dead grass. Some horses went wild and other wagons overturned. The crystal spikes continued to rise, appearing all over the empty field. Shouts rose from the nearby village at the end of the bridge from Tarvalin. "Gateway!" Fail screamed, still fighting her horses. "Do it!" Barisha jumped back as spikes jutted out of the ground near her feet. She threw a pale-faced glance at them, and only then did Fail realize that something was moving inside the shadowy crystals. It seemed like smoke. A crystal spike came up through Barisha's foot. She cried out, kneeling, just as a line of light split the air. Thank the light, the woman held her weave, and, with what seemed glacial slowness, the line of light rotated and opened a hole large enough for a wagon. "Through the gateway!" Fail shouted, but her voice was lost in the commotion. Crystals burst from the ground very near her left, tossing earth across her face. Her horses danced, then started to gallop. Rather than risking complete loss of control, Fail steered them toward the gateway. Right before they went through, however, she pulled them to a rearing halt. "The gateway!" she shouted at the others. Again, her voice was lost. Fortunately, the Red Arms took up the call, riding down the disordered line, grabbing the reins of horses and steering wagons toward the gateway. Other men picked up those who had been tossed to the ground. Harnan thundered past, carrying Ulver. He was followed by Sandeep, with Satala Anand clinging to him from behind. The frequency of the crystals increased. One jutted up near Fail, and with horror she realized that the smoky movements inside had form. Figures of men and women, screaming, as if trapped inside. She drew back, aghast.
Excuse me.
Nearby, the last working wagon rattled through the gateway. Soon the field would be nothing but crystals. Some straggling members of the band helped the wounded onto horses, but two fell as the crystals started budding growths that shot out to the sides. It was time to go. Aravim passed by, grabbing Fail's reins to pull them to safety. "Barisha," Fail said. The Aes Sedai knelt beside the opening, sweat trickling down her pale face. Fail leapt from her wagon seat, grabbing the woman's shoulder as Aravim pulled the wagon through the gateway. "Let's move," Fail said to Barisha. "I'll carry you." The woman teetered, then fell to the side, holding her stomach. Fail realized with a start that blood streamed around the woman's fingers. Barisha stared at the sky, mouth working, but no sounds came out. "My lady," Mandavwin galloped up. "I don't care where it leads. We must get through." "What?" She cut off as Mandavwin grabbed her by the waist and hauled her up, crystals exploding nearby. He galloped through the opening, holding her. The gateway snapped shut a moment later. Fail panted as Mandavwin let her down. She stared at where the gateway had been. His words finally caught up with her. "I don't care where it leads." He had seen something she, in her panic over getting everyone to safety, had not. The gateway hadn't led to the field of Merilor. "Where?" Fail whispered, joining the others, who stared at the horrid landscape. A sweltering heat, plants covered in spots of darkness, a scent of something awful in the air. They were in the Blight. Avienda chewed on her rations, crunchy rolled oats that had been mixed with honey. They tasted good. Being near Rand meant that their food stores had stopped spoiling. She reached for her water flask, then hesitated. She'd been drinking a lot of water lately. She rarely stopped to think about its value. Had she already forgotten the lessons she'd learned during her return to the Threefold Land to visit Ruidian? Light, she thought, raising the flask to her lips. Who cares? It's the last battle. She sat on the floor of a large Aiel tent in the valley of Thakandar. Mylene chewed on her own rations close by. The woman was near to term now with her twins, her belly bulging beneath her dress and shawl. Much as a maiden was forbidden to fight while with child, Mylene was forbidden dangerous activity. She had voluntarily gone to work in Berelane's healing station in Mayenne, but she regularly
Hey,
checked
High
on the
Life, how you
progress of
doing?
the battle. Many of the Gaishine had found their way through gateways to help as they
Hell
could,
yeah.
though all they could do was carry water or soil for the earthen mounds Ituralda had ordered cast up to give the defenders some kind of protection. A group of maidens ate nearby, chatting with hand talk. Avienda could have read it, but didn't. It would only make her wish she could join them. She'd become a wise one, and had forsaken her old life. That didn't mean she had purged herself of every bit of envy. Instead, she wiped out her wooden bowl and stowed it in her pack, stood up and slipped out of the tent. Outside, the night air was cool. It was about an hour before dawn, and felt almost like the Threefold Land at night. Avienda looked up at the mountain that dominated the valley. Despite the dark of early morning, she could see the pit leading inward. It had been many days since Rand had entered. Ituralda had wandered back into camp the night before with a tale of being held by wolves and a man who claimed Perenebara had
Oh,
sent
it's
him
so
to
good,
kidnap the great
High
captain.
Life. It's no problem.
Ituralda had been taken into custody and had not complained. The Trollocs had not attacked the valley all day. The defenders still had them held in the pass. The shadow seemed to be waiting for something. The light said it was not another attack by Murdral. The last one had nearly ended the resistance. Avienda had rallied the channelers once the Eyeless had emerged to kill the humans defending the mouth of the pass. They must have realized that exposing themselves in large numbers was unwise, and they fled back to the safety of the pass once the channeling began. Either way, she felt grateful for this rare moment of rest and relative peace between attacks. She stared into that pit in the mountain within which Rand fought. A strong pulse came from deep within it, channeling, in waves, powerful. Several days on the outside, but how long on the inside? A day? Hours? Minutes? Maidens who guarded the path up to the entrance claimed that after 4 hours of duty, they'd climb down the mountainside and find that 8 hours had passed. We have to hold, Avienda thought. We have to fight. Give him as much time as we can. At least she knew he still lived. She could sense that, and his pain. She looked away. As she did, she noticed something. A woman was channeling in the camp. It was faint, but Avienda frowned. At this hour, with no fighting, the only channeling should have been happening on the traveling ground, and this was in the wrong direction. Muttering to herself, she started through the camp. It was probably one of the off-duty wind finders again. They took turns rotating in and out of the group using the bowl of the winds constantly to keep the tempest at bay. That task was done atop the northern valley wall, well guarded by a large force of sea folks. They had to take gateways up there to change shifts. When the wind finders weren't on duty with the bowl, they camped with the rest of the army. Avienda had told them time and time again that while in the valley they were not allowed to channel for incidental reasons. One would think, after all the years they had spent never letting Aes Sedai see them use their powers, that they could be more self-controlled. If she caught another one of them using the one power to warm her tea, she'd send her to Soralia for an education. This was supposed to be a secure camp. Avienda froze in place. That channeling was not coming from the small ring of tents where the Windfinders made camp. Had she sensed an incursion? A Dreadlord or Forsaken would probably assume that in a camp this large, filled with Aes Sedai, Windfinders, and Wise Ones, no one would notice a tiny bit of channeling here or there. Avienda immediately crouched beside a nearby tent, avoiding the light of a lantern on a pole. The channeling came again, very faint. She crept forward. If this turns out to be someone heating water for a bath. She moved between tents, across the hard earth. As she drew closer, she took off her boots and left them behind, then pulled her dagger from its sheath. She couldn't risk embracing the source, lest she reveal herself to her prey. The camp didn't truly sleep. The warriors who were not on duty had trouble slumbering here. Fatigue among the spears, including the maidens, was becoming a problem. They complained of terrible dreams. Avienda continued forward silently, slipping between tents, avoiding those that shone with light. This place disturbed all of them, so she was not surprised to hear of bad dreams. How could they sleep in peace, so close to the Dark One's abode? Logically, she knew that the Dark One was not nearby, not really. That wasn't what the boar was. He didn't live in this place. He existed outside the pattern, inside his prison. Still, bedding down here was like trying to sleep while a murderer stood beside your bed, holding a knife and contemplating the color of your hair. There, she thought, slowly.
I got tangled too about halfway.
The channeling stopped, but Avienda was close. Drakkar attacks and the threat of Murderal slipping in at night had driven the camp leaders to spread the officers throughout the camp, in tents that bore no external sign of which belonged to a commander and which to a common foot soldier. Avienda, however, knew this tent to belong to Darlin Cisnera. Darlin had official command of this battlefield now that Ituralde had fallen. He was not a general, but the Tyran army was the bulk of the defense, with the Defenders of the Stone their elite units. Their commander, Tihera, was good with tactics, and Darlin listened well to the man's suggestions. Tihera was not a great captain, but he was very clever. He, Darlin, and Ruark had been devising their battle plans, following Ituralde's fall. In the darkness, Avienda nearly missed the three figures crouched ahead of her, just outside Darlin's tent. They gestured to one another, silent, and she could see little about them, not even their clothing. She raised her knife, and then a bolt of lightning split the sky, giving her a better glimpse of one. The man was wearing a veil. Aiel. They noticed the intruder too, she thought, stalking up to them and raising a hand to keep them from attacking. She whispered, "I felt channeling nearby, and I do not think it is from one of ours. What have you seen?" The three men stared at her as if stunned, though she couldn't make out much of their faces. Then they attacked her. Avienda cursed, leaping backward as their spears came out and one threw a knife in her direction. Aiel dark friends? She felt a fool. She should have known better. She reached out to embrace the source. If a female dreadlord was nearby, she'd feel what Avienda did, but there was no help for it. She needed to survive these three. However, as Avienda reached for the one power, something snapped into place between her and the source. A shield, with weaves she could not see. One of these men could channel. Avienda's reaction was instinctive. She shoved down her panic, stopped scrambling to touch the source, and threw herself at the nearest of the men. She caught his spear thrust with her off hand, ignoring the pain as the spearhead sliced against her ribs, and hauled him forward to ram her knife in his neck. One of the other two cursed, and Avienda suddenly found herself wrapped in weaves of air, unable to speak or move. Blood soaked into her blouse and pooled against her wounded side. The man she'd struck gasped and thrashed on the ground as he died. The other two did not move to help him. One of the dark friends stepped forward, lithe, almost invisible in the darkness. He pulled her face close to inspect her, then waved his hand to the other. A very soft light appeared beside them, giving them a better look at her, and her at them. They wore red
I didn't have
veils,
too bad of a day.
but this one had taken his down
Me
for
and
the fight.
my
Why?
brother went to
What was this?
our
No
mom's
Aiel
and
she knew did that.
he made
Were
dinner
these
for
the
him.
Shido? Had they joined the
I
Shadow?
helped out a little bit.
One
He
of the
did
men
most
made a
of the
few
cooking.
gestures to the other. It was
Well, I made
hand
dinner
talk.
for
Not maiden hand talk, but something
our
similar.
our
The other
mom and
man
that.
nodded. Avienda thrashed against her invisible bonds. She slammed her will against that shield, biting down on her gag of air. The Aiel on the right, the taller one, the one who probably held her shield, grunted. She felt as if her fingers were clawing at the edge of a nearly shut door, with light, warmth, and power beyond. That door wouldn't budge an inch. The tall Aiel narrowed his eyes at her. He let the light he'd summoned vanish, plunging them into darkness. Avienda heard him take out a spear. A foot fell on the ground nearby. The red veils heard it and spun. Avienda looked as best she could,
Round two done.
but couldn't make out the newcomer. The men stood perfectly still. "What is this?" a woman's voice asked. "Catswain." She approached, a lantern in her hand. Avienda was jerked away as the man holding her weaves pulled her back into the shadows, and Catswain did not seem aware of her. Catswain saw only the other man, who stood closer to the pathway. That Aiel man stepped from the shadows. He'd lowered his veil, too. "I thought I heard something near the tents here, Aes Sedai," he said. He had a strange accent, one that was slightly off, only by a shade. A wetlander would never know the difference. "These aren't Aiel," Avienda thought. "There's something different." Her mind wrestled with the concept.
Hell yeah.
Aiel, who were not Aiel,
Fire.
men who could channel. The men we send, she realized with horror. Men discovered among the Aiel with the ability to channel were sent to try to kill the Dark One. Alone, they came to the Blight. Nobody knew what happened to them after that. Avienda began to struggle again, trying to make noise, any noise, to alert Catswain. The attempts were in vain. She hung tightly in the air, in the darkness, and Catswain wasn't looking in her direction. "Well, did you find anything?" Catswain asked the man. "No, Aes Sedai." "I will speak to the guards," Catswain said, sounding dissatisfied. "We must be vigilant. If a Drakkar, or worse, a Murdral, managed to sneak in, it could kill dozens before being discovered." Catswain turned to go. Avienda shook her head, tears of frustration in her eyes, so close. The red veil who had been with Catswain stepped back into the shadows, going up to Avienda. In a flash of lightning, she caught a smile on his lips, mimicked by the one who still held her in the bonds. The red veil in front of her slid a dagger from his belt, then reached up for her. She watched that knife, helpless, as he raised it to her throat. She sensed channeling. The bonds holding her were gone instantly, and she dropped to the ground. Avienda caught the man's knife hand as she fell, his eyes opening wide. Though she embraced the source by raw, mad instinct, her hands were already moving. She twisted the man's wrist, snapping the bones where hand met arm. She caught the knife with her other hand, then slammed it into his eye as he started to scream in pain. The scream cut off. The red veil fell at her feet, and she looked with anxiety toward the one beside her, the one who had been holding her in weaves. He lay dead on the ground. Gasping, she scrambled toward the path nearby and found Cadswain. "It is a simple thing," To stop a man's heart, Cadswain said, arms folded. She seemed dissatisfied. So close to healing, yet opposite in effect. Perhaps it is an evil thing, yet I've always failed to see how it would be worse than simply burning a man to ash with fire. How? Avienda asked. How did you recognize what they were? I am not a half-trained wilder, Cadswain replied. I would have liked to strike them down when I first arrived, but I had to be certain before I could act. When that one threatened you with the knife, I knew. Avienda breathed in and out, trying to still her heart. And, of course, there was the other one, Cadswain said, the one that channeled. How many male Aiel warriors can secretly channel? Was this an anomaly, or have your people been covering them up? What? No, we don't, or we didn't. Avienda wasn't certain what they would do now that the source had been cleansed. Men certainly should stop being sent alone to die fighting the Dark One. You're certain? Cadswain asked, voice flat. Yes. Pity. That could have been a large boon to us now. Cadswain shook her head. I wouldn't have been surprised after finding out about those wind finders. So these were just run-of-the-mill dark friends, with one among them who had hidden his channeling ability? What were they about tonight? They are anything but ordinary dark friends, Avienda said softly, inspecting the corpses. Red veils. The man who had been able to channel wore his teeth filed to points, but the other two did not. What did it mean? We need to alert the camp, Avienda continued. It's possible that these three merely walked in unchallenged. Many of the Wetlander guards avoid challenging Aiel. They assume that all of us serve the Karakan. To many Wetlanders, an Aiel was an Aiel. Fools. Though, to be honest, Avienda had to admit that her own first instinct upon seeing Aiel had been to think them allies. When had that happened? Not 2 years back. If she'd caught unfamiliar Algai de Siswai prowling about, she'd have attacked. Avienda continued her inspection of the dead men. A knife on each man, spears and bows. Nothing else telling. However, her thoughts whispered to her that she was missing something. The female channeler, she said suddenly, looking up. It was a woman using the one power that drew me, Aes Sedai. Was that you? I did not channel until I killed that man, Cadswain said, frowning. Avienda dropped back into a battle stance, hugging the shadows. What would she find next? Wise ones who served the shadow? Cadswain frowned as Avienda scouted the area further. She passed Darlin's tent, where soldiers outside huddled around lamps and cast shadows that danced on the canvas. She passed soldiers in tight groups walking along the pathways, not speaking. They carried torches, blinding their eyes to the night. Avienda had heard Tyran officers remark that it was nice for once to have no worry about their sentries dozing on duty. With the lightning, the Trolloc drums in the near distance, the occasional raids by shadow spawn trying to slip into camp, soldiers knew to be wary. The frosted air smelled of smoke, with putrid scents blowing in from the Trolloc camps. She eventually gave up the hunt and walked back the way she had come, finding Cadswain speaking with a group of soldiers. Avienda was about to approach when her eyes passed over a patch of darkness nearby, and her senses came alert. That patch of darkness is channeling. Avienda began weaving a shield immediately. The one in the darkness wove fire and air toward Cadswain. Avienda dropped her weave and instead lashed out with spirit, slicing the enemy weave just as it was released. Avienda heard a curse, and a quick weave of fire blossomed in her direction. Avienda ducked as it lashed overhead, hissing in the cold air. The wave of heat passed. Her enemy ducked out of the shadows. Whatever weave she'd been using to hide had collapsed. revealing the woman Avienda had fought before, the one with the face almost as ugly as a Trollocs. The woman dashed behind a group of tents just before the ground ripped up behind her, a weave that Avienda hadn't made. A second later, the woman folded again, as she had before, vanishing. Avienda stood warily. She turned toward Cadsuane, who walked up to her. "Thank you," the woman said grudgingly, "for disrupting that weave." "I suppose we are even then," Avienda said. "Even? No, not by several hundred years, child. I will admit that I am thankful for your intervention." She frowned. "She vanished. She did that before." "A method of traveling we do not know," Cadsuane said, looking troubled. "I saw no flows for it. Perhaps a Turangreal?" A shot of red light rose from the front lines of the army. The Trollocs were attacking. At the same time, Avienda felt channeling in different spots around the camp. 1, 2, 3. She spun about, trying to locate each of the locations. She counted 5. "Channelers," Cadsuane said sharply. "Dozens of them." "Dozens? I sense 5. "Most are men, fool child," Cadsuane said, waving a hand. "Go, gather the others." Avienda dashed away, yelling the alarm. She would have words with Cadsuane later for ordering her about. Maybe. Having words with Cadsuane often left one feeling like a complete fool. Avienda ran into the Aiel section of camp in time to see Anise and Soralia pulling on their shawls, checking the sky. Flynn stumbled out of a nearby tent, blinking bleary eyes. "Men," he said. "Channeling? Have more Ashaman arrived?" "Unlikely," Avienda said. "Amis, Soralia, I need a circle." They raised eyebrows at her. She might be one of them now, and she might have command by the Kara Karn's authority, but reminding Soralia of that would end with Avienda buried to her neck in sand. "If you please," she added quickly. "It is your say, Avienda," Soralia said. "I will go and speak with the others and send them to you so you may have your circle. We will make 2, I think, as you have suggested before. That would be for the best." Stubborn as Cadsuane, that one is, Avienda thought. The 2 of them could teach lessons on patience to trees. Still, Soralia was not strong in the power. In fact, she could barely channel, so it would be wise to use others, as she suggested. Soralia began calling for the other wise ones and Aes Sedai. Avienda suffered the delay with anxiety. Already she could hear screams and explosions in the valley. Streams of fire arced into the air, then dropped. "Soralia," Avienda said softly to the elder wise one, as the women began to build the circles. "I was attacked in camp just now by 3 Aiel men. The battle we are about to fight, it will probably involve other Aiel who fight for the shadow." Soralia turned sharply, meeting Avienda's eyes. "Explain." "I think they must be the men we sent to kill Sightblinder," Avienda said. Soralia hissed softly. "If this is true, child, then this night will mark great toh for us all. Toh toward the Kara Karn. Toh toward the land itself." "I know. Bring me word," Soralia said. "I will organize a 3rd circle. Maybe make some of those off-duty windfinders join in." Avienda nodded, then accepted control of the circle as it was handed to her. She had 3 Aes Sedai who had sworn to Rand, and 2 wise ones. By her order, Flynn did not join the circle. She wanted him to be on the watch for signs of men channeling, ready to point the direction, and being in the circle might make that impossible for him to do. They moved off like a squad of spear sisters. They passed clusters of Tyrant defenders, pulling on burnished breastplates over uniforms with wide striped sleeves. In one group, she found King Darlin bellowing orders. "A moment," she said to the others, hastening to the tyrant. "Them all," Darlin said to his commanders. "Don't let the front lines weaken. We can't let those monsters spill into the valley." It appeared that he'd been awakened from sleep by the attack, for he stood dressed only in trousers and a white undershirt. A disheveled serving man held out Darlin's coat, but the king, distracted by a messenger, turned away. When Darlin saw Avienda, he waved her forward urgently. The serving man heaved a sigh, lowering the coat. "I'd given up on them attacking tonight," Darlin said, then glanced at the sky. "Or, well, this morning. The scout reports are so confused. I feel like I've been thrown into a coop full of crazed chickens and told to catch the one with a single black feather." "Those reports," Avienda said, "do they mention Aiel men fighting for the shadow, possibly channeling?" Darlin turned sharply. "It's true." "Yes." "And the Trollocs are pushing with everything they have to force their way into the valley," Darlin said. "If those Aiel dreadlords start attacking our troops, we won't stand a chance without you lot being there to hold them off." "We're moving," Avienda said. "Send for Amis and Cadswain to make gateways. But I warn you, I caught a dreadlord sneaking around near your tent." Darlin paled. "Like Ituralda. Light, they didn't touch me. I swear it, He raised a hand to his head. "Who do we trust if we cannot trust our own minds?" "We must make the dance of spears as simple as possible," Avienda said. "Go to Ruark, gather your leaders. Plan how you will face the shadow together. Do not let one man control the battle, and set your plans in place. Do not allow them to be changed." "That could lead to disaster," Darlin said. "If we don't have flexibility." "What needs to be changed?" Avienda asked grimly. "We hold, with everything we have. We hold. We don't pull back. We don't try anything clever. We just hold." Darlin nodded. "I'll send for gateways to put maidens atop those slopes. They can take out those Trollocs shooting arrows down at our lads. Can you deal with the enemy channelers?" "Yes." Avienda returned to her group, then started to draw on their power. The more of the one power you held, the harder it was to cut you off from the true source. She intended to hold so much that no man could separate her from it. Helplessness. She hated feeling helpless. She let the anger at what had been done to her rage inside of her, and led her group toward the nearest source of male channeling that Flynn could identify.
Chapter 34. Drifting. Rand stood in a place that was not. A place outside of time, outside of the pattern itself. All around him spread a vast nothingness, voracious and hungry it longed to consume. He could actually see the pattern. It looked like thousands upon thousands of twisting ribbons of light. They spun around him, above him, undulating and shimmering, twisting together. At least that was how his mind chose to interpret it. Everything that had ever been, everything that could be, everything that could have been, it all lay right there before him. Rand could not comprehend it. The blackness around it sucked on him, pulled him toward it. He reached out to the pattern and somehow anchored himself in it, lest he be consumed. That changed his focus. It locked him slightly into a time. The pattern before him rippled, and Rand watched it being woven. It was not actually the pattern, he knew, but his mind saw it that way. Familiar as it had been described, the threads of lives weaving together. Rand anchored himself in reality again and moved with it. Time had meaning again, and he could not see ahead or behind. He could see all places, like a man standing above a globe as it turned. Rand faced the emptiness. "So," he said into it, This is where it will really happen. Morden would have had me believe that a simple sword fight would decide this all. He is of me, but his eyes are small. Yes, Rand said. I have noticed the same. Small tools can be effective. The thinnest of knives can stop a heart. He has brought you here, adversary. None of this had happened the last time when Rand had worn the name of Luce Theron. He could only interpret that as a good sign. Now the battle truly began. He looked into the nothingness and felt it welling up. Then, like a sudden storm, the Dark One brought all of his force against Rand. Perrin fell back against a tree, gasping at the pain. Slayer's arrow had impaled his shoulder, the arrowhead coming out his back. He didn't dare pull it free, not with. He wavered. Thoughts came lethargically. Where was he? He'd shifted away from Slayer as far as he could go, but he didn't recognize this place. The trees were odd-shaped on top, too leafy, of a variety he'd never before seen. The storm blew here, but far more weakly. Perrin slipped and hit the ground with a grunt. His shoulder flared with pain. He rolled over, staring up at the sky. He'd broken the arrow when falling. It's the wolf dream. I can just make the arrow vanish. He tried to gather the strength to do so, but was too weak. He found himself floating, and he sent outward, seeking for wolves.
All right, arrow. I'm gonna call into his life for tonight. I want to thank everyone for stopping by. Everyone keeps stopping by. I got a little zoned out on that book and forgot what time it was. I almost started falling asleep. But till next time, everyone, y'all have a good one. Stay safe.